Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Diary of a Folk Witch. My name is Zanna and I'm a practising priestess, doula and animistic folk witch living in Lancashire. Here I will share with you a blend of essays and diary entries that allow you to peer into the very real world of a modern practising, traditional style folk witch and wise woman. You are invited into my innermost world of actual everyday living witchcraft. Everything from folklore to foraging, herbalism to urban homesteading, divination, spiritual practice and more. I don't niche down here, you see it all, because I'm not just a witch when I'm performing workings, it's in every area of my life. And you get to share that with me. Diaries are supposed to be places where we document our deepest secrets, but I believe some secrets are worth sharing, so let me share my life with you. Keeping house, the autumn equinox and the home. Date: September 19th, 2023. Moon phase, waxing crescent. Weather: mild but wet. Location: home, Lancashire. This week, I wanted to take some time to talk to you about the autumn equinox and keeping house, the act of preparing for the colder months and also practising some sympathetic home magic. When I first started to explore witchcraft over 20 years ago, gosh, that makes me feel really old, because if we're going to be specific, it's actually been about 24 years since I first started officially practising witchcraft. But I digress. When I first started to explore the world of neo-pagan witchcraft, separate from the folk witchery in which I'd grown up with through my mother and other family members, there really wasn't a lot out there, at least that was easily accessible. If you were lucky enough, you might have had access to the internet, but even then it tended to be that old school dial-up broadband, which meant that you couldn't use the phone and the internet at the same time, which, to be honest, it kind of made it a pretty unreliable service. But if you were lucky enough to have that, you might have been able to access a chat room for witches or find some websites on witchcraft. However, in general, you would have had to head out to source books or find a local moot. And for me personally, I couldn't just find occult books or esoteric titles in, your average high street bookshop. I had to travel all the way to central London and explore shops like Watkins and the amazing Atlantis bookstore. Now, of course, you can find at least a small or modest collection of occult and esoteric books in nearly any high street bookshop in the UK. But sometimes, still accessing actual everyday and reliable living witchcraft can be a little bit tricky. So many witchcraft books today seem to be about teaching you various strands of witchcraft, as opposed to simply sharing their own ways and means with you. Now, there's nothing wrong with informative or academic-like occult books. They're brilliant in their own way. But I do wish there was a little bit more out there that shared just everyday magic that, either wasn't hyped up or dumbed down. Just really authentic everyday magic that's not necessarily that of a Wiccan practitioner or necessarily even a pagan, but of just your everyday folk witch. One of the things I really loved as a young woman exploring witchcraft was getting out there and talking to witches and just listening to their stories and their ways. One of the reasons I think that I relate so much to people like Cecil Williamson is because, like him, I seem to have the knack of accidentally bumping into and making the acquaintance of various wayside witches throughout my younger years. Over the years, I feel I've learnt so much more from these interactions than reading any number of occult and esoteric books. There's a distinct magic to oral traditions and passing on of what my family at least called ways and means, and learning that through word of mouth and shared experience. And this is ultimately what I seek to do here, to pass on my ways and means via the medium of audio diaries. Not necessarily to, teach, but to record one witch's folkways and perhaps have the honour of inspiring a few other witches along the way. Perhaps even build a community. This week, I'm going to be taking some time to teach you how I personally keep house, in a magical sense at least, specifically from the perspective of honouring this practice around the time of the autumn equinox, because house magic and ritual take on a whole new level at this time of year for me, and I'm going to explain why. As a folk witch, I move with the seasons of the year and the phases of the moon, and am like everyone else, influenced by planetary movements and all other cycles in life. Traditionally speaking, the autumn equinox is all about two things. The first is balance. After all, an equinox is where both night and day are an equal length to one another. And so, this time of year, as with the spring equinox, represents balance. Both the spring and autumnal equinoxes occur at seasonal and agricultural times when, as humans, we are either preparing to nest for the darker months or re-emerge from the darkness of winter into the light of brighter months of spring and summer, both of which require preparation, which brings me on to the second aspect of the autumn equinox, taking stock and being prepared. It may not be as applicable to us and the general populace today as it once was for our ancestors of not so long ago, but as a species we had little choice but to respect nature and learn its cycles. A wise person once told me, "The earth is our mother, and when she tells us to do something, we do it or we face the consequences." The consequences of not honouring nature and ensuring that one or even a whole community was prepared for winter could quite literally mean starvation. So, from Lunasa to Samhain, people would collect and preserve their harvest. As well as this, other practicalities would be observed. Hay would be stored for animal use over the winter. Older people in the community who were perhaps not as able to participate in the actual farming side of harvesting would often help with other familial or homely tasks. For older women, this sometimes meant watching the younger children while their mothers were busy doing other chores. These women, often grandmothers, would also take part in mending items, knitting warm clothes, and even the age-old art of quilting. Sadly, I don't have many first-hand stories of my grandmother's experiences of growing up on the farm back in Ireland, as she's now being treated for dementia. But I do remember her casually mentioning while telling me off for being young and, in her words, idle, that when she was a child, everyone in the family was put to use. The children would do the lighter tasks and be trained simultaneously so that they could do more work as their age and skill set increased. And even grannies would be busy cooking, stitching or knitting. Therefore, I had no excuse to be sat down watching the TV. This story has stayed with me. This idea of whole family units working together and observing not necessarily gender roles, but roles based on skill and ability intrigued me. As an adult, this is something I've researched even more through learning about permaculture and homesteading. I may not have had the luxury of growing up on a rural Irish farm like other members of my family, but the farming gene has been very strongly passed down to me. I practice urban homesteading and am working my way towards one day having my very own smallholding, croft or rural homestead back in Ireland. Our life in 2023 is of course very different from that of our ancestors. Yes, we're still bound to the agricultural wheel of the year and its vulnerability to poor weather and crop failure, but in a more removed way. Instead, we rely on supermarkets, industrial farming and importation to get our food on the table. Usually, the only concern we as consumers have today is whether or not we have enough money to purchase our groceries. Slowly, more and more people are trying to rewind from this divorced attitude to both their connection to nature and how it was their food made it from farm to dinner table. Pursuits such as permaculture, gardening, allotment keeping and urban homesteading have never been so popular. Deep down, a lot of people are awakening to the realisation that the real thing that they might be longing for is in fact a relationship with the earth. And I'm noticing this is particularly true of witches. You only have to search the hashtag #GreenWitch to see how many people are reclaiming their earth connections. But even though we're trying to turn the clock back and become more self-sufficient, it's rare to ever be fully self-sufficient in this day and age. And this means no matter how hard we try, the way in which we as people living in 2023 celebrate the agricultural calendar which is ultimately what the neo-pagan Wheel of the Year is, a bit of a mix and match of European and Celtic agricultural and fire festivals, it will never be the same as how it was perhaps celebrated historically. And you know what? That's actually okay. We all evolve and we all change. But what are the common threads that connect the modern folk witch practices to older folk ways and customs of Britain and Ireland? What can we do to follow the Wheel of the Year and move with its cycles? Well, as mentioned previously, the equinox is all about balance and preparation. In the spring, we think about making way for the sun. Many of us do things such as go on a cleansing diet to work off some of those, comforting mince pies from the festive holidays. Other people like to have a big spring clean, especially with the influx of new gifts and belongings from over the festive holidays. Some are waking up their garden and planting new bulbs and seeds. It doesn't matter whether you're a folk witch or not, we are still cyclical creatures, and many find that they have an inner alarm clock that goes off around the time of the equinoxes. It's just that perhaps the folk witch will do more ritualistic things around this time, such as well as having a big spring clean in the spring. We may also conduct a house cleansing ritual and blessing too. We are consciously preparing ourselves for those brighter months and shedding ourselves of all the layers of winter. Then, when the autumn equinox rolls around, as it is now, we begin to move from shedding to collecting. We collect, forage, and store. We might start to consider swapping out light summer clothes for our nice jackets and jumpers, and even subconsciously crave warming foods and spices such as pumpkin and cinnamon. For me, the autumn equinox, well, all of September in fact, is all about keeping house and bringing some internal balance back, especially after the fun and chaos of the summer holidays. Many of us find that September is a time about getting back into routine, and for me, keeping house is a wonderful act of sympathetic magic to bring everything back into balance and realignment again. The weather up until the day before yesterday had been just extremely beautiful for this time of year. We'd actually been experiencing what some people call an Indian summer, so it was still really hot and lovely. But now the torrential rains have come. And yet, even though the weather was, up until a couple of days ago, really beautiful and hot, the mornings and the evenings offered us a clear sign that autumn was in fact on the way. To the trained eye, the pretend extended summer was only ever an illusion. The sun is slowly starting to wake up a little later in the mornings and is now gradually going to sleep a little earlier in the evenings too. Around the time of the summer solstice, it was daylight until about 10 o'clock at night. Now the dusk creeps in at around 7 p.m. So you see, even though the weather was gorgeous, the sun and the earth were still prompting me to prepare. All of our blackberries have been picked and preserved, and I'm currently foraging for elderberries. I'm restocking my apothecary with all the herbs that I know I will likely need over the winter for colds and flu, and anything that cannot be grown or foraged will be bought from organic suppliers. I have bought alcohol, not for midwinter parties, but to prepare medicinal tinctures, and I'm off shopping tomorrow for chilies to make warming capsicum balm for winter chills and aches and pains. So, what specifically do I do during September to prepare for the equinox? Well, quite a lot, as it takes about 2 or 3 weeks to achieve it all. And this year I've been working away since September 2nd. So, in no particular order, because so many of these tasks are subject to time, the weather, personal needs and so on, I will now share with you how I keep house for the autumn equinox. Clothes, wardrobes and bedding. So far, I've not yet had to swap any clothes out due to the recent heat wave. But now that the weather's changed and it's raining and there's a distinct chill in the air, I think the time has come to do my annual equinox clear out. Around the time of the equinox, I like to go through everyone's wardrobes and have a really good stock take. I would take out all the items of clothing from drawers and wardrobes and then sort out what fits and what no longer fits. Items that no longer fit will either go into storage to pass down to the younger children or will be gifted to local charity shops, which, if you're one of my American listeners, a charity shop is basically our version of your thrift store. The items that are seasonal for spring and summer will then be neatly put into boxes and placed in the loft for next year's use. Before the clothes that still fit are put away, I will physically clean the drawers and wardrobes, inside and out, with a nice cleansing spray made especially for physical cleaning as well as energetic cleansing. This cleansing spray is a solution made of sacred spring waters taken from both the red and white springs of Glastonbury, and mixed with rose water and both lavender and pine essential oils. This is just one small piece of sympathetic magic to get in and cleanse all those harder to reach areas. You would be surprised the places that old, stale or negative emotions and energy can lurk and gather in when they do not want to be moved on. Clothes especially hold a lot of emotion and memories for us, and I've known energy to become stuck and clogged around wardrobes and closets. As an adult, I've wondered if this is partly where the whole childhood unease around closet and wardrobe monsters come from. Children are highly receptive. Perhaps they're picking up upon lots of collective energy that never gets moved on and is trapped in that liminal space. It wouldn't surprise me if perhaps childhood anxieties over monsters in closets are actually just stale and accumulated energy, and could in fact combine to create some form of foot form energy. But even if I'm totally off base there and I'm wrong, there's still no harm in energetically cleansing our storage spaces. As a witch and a priestess, it's not uncommon for me to be called in to help someone perform some kind of spiritual house cleansing. And one thing I always ask to be done before I arrive is that the occupants have a thorough tidy up and a practical purge of the home, as this is half of the practical and sympathetic side of the magical act. I recently heard someone on social media describe witchcraft as spicy psychology. It's a bit of an oversimplistic way of describing the power of mind, spirit and energy, but at the same time it's not exactly wrong either. When you think about it, practical magic, and in this case having a good cleanse, makes a lot of sense. As humans, we place a lot of thought and emotion into what we wear and use. So many of us have a lucky item of clothing or hold on to a piece that no longer fits us, purely because it brings us joy. Some people even hang on to old wedding dresses or baby clothes, even though that child is grown up, or even if that marriage has broken down and ended in divorce, yet still those items are there. Both items that are often infused with heightened emotion, either happiness or sadness. So it's natural that some energy can be caught up in our clothing and storage spaces. As a side note, one piece of advice I will offer is that if your wardrobe is holding on to old items of clothes that you no longer wear, but you keep it because you love it due to the memories attached, you could consider placing it into a memory box instead. This memory box can hold this memory piece safely without clogging up needed space for the now. Our memories are so important, but our now, our present moment, is even more important. By all means, keep that item that holds memories for you, but perhaps consider storing them elsewhere so that your past and your now are healthy. Using a space cleansing spray or cleansing an area with the smoke of herbs or incense helps to shift energy and our perspective of a space. The two acts combined of spirit and psychology is often what defines whether a space has a good flow of energy or not. As well as sorting out the clothes, the bedding cupboards are next, and this process is very similar to how I go through the clothing. All of the lightweight summer linens of the summer are switched out and the warmer duvets and blankets are brought in, and again the airing cupboard, where all of this is stored, is then physically and energetically cleansed. But here a little ancestral magic and connection happens too. In my family, both my own and my husband's side, we're all natural crafters. The women on both sides love to knit, sew and crochet, and it isn't gender specific either, as my husband also likes to get crafty by upcycling old t-shirts into yarn and making baskets. It really is quite cool, and I think he shows a few of them off on his Instagram page, which is under the name of Druid of Manannan, if you want to check that out. Coming as I do from a crafty family, I'm blessed to have so many lovely handmade quilts and blankets. One particular is a quilted blanket that was made by my mother, which is fondly known as Old Patchy. And another loved item is the blue healing blanket. Both blankets are used as comforters and as magical tools for healing when someone in the family is unwell. You see, like most families with young children, we often find that from September through to March that we are hit with several different colds, flus and viral nasties, all inevitably picked up from various stay and play sessions, home education clubs or playgroups that our children attend. When an illness is in the house, a lot of little folkways come out of the woodwork, such as leaving the windows open to allow the element of air to remove the spirit of sickness, making chicken noodle broth, hot honey and vinegar elixirs and other such remedies, also invoking the colour of blue. Whenever I was sick as a child, my maternal grandmother would always get out a blue blanket out of the airing cupboard to cover me while I was unwell in bed. Why? Because it was believed that blue was the colour of healing and just being near it could focus its healing energies. Obviously, we can get sick at any time of the year, but spring and autumn always sees me carefully wash and restore both Old Patchy and my own blue blanket. A small act of sympathetic magic that reminds me that even when illness comes knocking on the door, I am always ready with medicine and comfort. The apothecary and herbal medicine. Next on the list is the apothecary. I have been a lifelong student of natural and holistic healing arts and have now taken the next step on my journey by starting to study clinical herbalism. For many years I have studied the natural world, herbs, research papers and books on herbal medicine. I even make my own medicinals too. I have come a long way from the young girl testing out a homemade echinacea tincture to the woman I am today that has a full, large Welsh dresser and pantry full of dried herbs, teas, tinctures, essential oils, salves and more. So, twice a year, I do a complete stock take, restock and make all of the remedies I anticipate that I will need throughout the spring or winter months. Dried or frozen elderberries for syrups or oxymels, mullein, coltsfoot and marshmallow for coughs, slippery elm bark for sore throats, etc. Can you see what I mean now when I say that for me, both the spring and autumn equinoxes are all about balance, taking stock and preparation. These holidays are a wonderful time for sympathetic magic and harnessing lots of that get it done energy that's floating about. The kitchen. The next task on the list is to do a full stock take of the kitchen and pantry. If there are any seasonal foods, they go onto the counter so that they can get used up first. Foods with a shorter shelf life get pushed up to the front, and then I do a complete physical and energetic cleanse of the kitchen, its cupboards, drawers and pantry. I then do a bulk restock for the autumn. Everything from seasonal spices and herbs to various types of flour, dried fruits and more. All those lovely comforting foods that I know will be appreciated by my family as the weather starts to chill. One piece of practical magic that I really love is a little piece of witchcraft that was passed down to me by family, and that is to always leave a £1 coin in every cupboard or space that holds food. This is to ensure that you always have enough money for food and that you never run out of money. There is a condition though. You must never spend this coin, you can only gift it on. In this instance, it is said that to gift one of your cheeky pounds, as they're known as, is to give a huge amount of love and luck to another person. In the same way that you should never gift someone an empty purse or wallet because it seemed to be unlucky, so too are you supposedly not meant to allow a younger generation of the family to move home without gifting them something. At least this was the case in my family. And so, when I first got married, my nan gifted me one of her cheeky pound coins. I too will observe this custom when my own children eventually fly the nest. However, to ever spend this coin means that you gift away your magic and faith in that you are always provided for, and therefore is always seen to be unlucky. I have practiced this little folk way for many years, and even in times of significant financial difficulty, I have always somehow managed to keep food on the table, even if it meant money coming to me from unexpected places at the 11th hour. So you see, I never doubt this small act of witchcraft now, and I always use it. Please feel free to use this form of money magic for yourselves. Take a coin of reasonable value, so no penny coins for example. You want something that you could at least actually hypothetically buy food with. So here in England you might use a £1 or a £2 coin. And you can do this with whatever your national currency is. You just place that one coin into each of your cupboards that contain food. During this time, the kitchen and pantry is given a thorough organise and scrub. Nothing is left unturned, because I do far more cooking and celebrating in the winter than I do in the summer. A wise woman once told me that far from seeing the kitchen as a prison and a symbol of misogynistic status being thrust upon women, that we should actually see the kitchen as the throne of our power. It was explained to me that instead of seeing the kitchen as degrading, that we should seek to claim it as our place of creativity and magic. Let some chauvinists make worn out and tired jokes about a woman's place being in the kitchen. Let them think of it as a place of toil. In reality, it's a place of magic, healing and power. Regardless of gender, the kitchen is where so much life comes from, and it's a space where any witch can go and work their ways and means. The kitchen is a sacred place where we prepare food to nourish and comfort our bodies, a space where we express ourselves creatively, make medicine, and even gather around kitchen tables to celebrate or drink a quiet tea and sacred listen to one another. As such, our kitchen should always be seen as a living heartbeat in the house and the throne of the witch. And this is why I give it so much attention, both practically and energetically, especially around the times of the equinoxes. Decoration. One of the things I really love to do, much to my husband's dismay, is to mark the changing of the seasons with decorations. I always find that it makes the home look so much more cheerful and inviting, and the neighbourhood kids always seem to really love our Christmas and Halloween decorations. This year, I've chosen to keep the seasonal decorations to the porch, front door and the kitchen window only. All of this is at the front of the house, and it greets us whenever we come home, smiling at us and welcoming us in. Our porch is decorated in faux golden and auburn autumn leaves, a beautiful autumnal wreath upon the front door and pumpkin window stickers. It's subtle but very pretty. I enjoy decorating the home because it's a wonderful way of marking the changing of the seasons and serves as a nice visual reminder that the wheel is turning. I feel that they also keep the house current and in the now, in the present moment. Homes have a way of becoming a bit samey and boring if we leave it to its own way. Then we can become bored, and from experience, boredom seems to breed frustration and then niggling anxieties or bickering around the house. It's surprising actually how a little tweaking of the visual atmosphere can wake up the home and bring so much joy, thus avoiding boredom and that slippery slope that boredom and bored occupants can skid upon. If you're thinking about decorating your home for seasonal changes, remember it doesn't have to be big or expensive, nor does it have to be bad for the environment. Sometimes less really is more when it comes to seasonal decorations. And I think that everything I bought this year came to under £20. Not only that, all of it has the potential to be used again and therefore isn't single waste. The house cleansing. Finally, one of the final things I do for my keeping of house is to perform a full house cleansing and blessing. Though this is not restricted to just the equinoxes, I choose to do this every Sabbath. I find this keeps the house energetically clean, happy and wholesome. Having 5 children means that my home never usually stays physically tidy for more than maybe 10 minutes. But one thing I always take pride in is how much that guests like our home. It's been described as almost like a sanctuary, that once the door is closed it feels so safe and comforting, and I really love this. I think it's a testament to how much work I put into energetically and physically maintaining my home. I won't be sharing my full house cleansing ritual here today because it's long, but I am in the process of setting up my Patreon account, so Patreon supporters will be able to soon access it there. But in essence, Once the house has had a thorough clean and sort out, I seal with a cleansing and blessing. This involves lots of drumming, bells being rung, incense to cleanse, floors and windows being washed in 4 thieves vinegar, and then sacred spring water. Mirrors are cleansed and floors cleaned with herbal strews. Despite doing house cleansings and blessings 8 times a year at least, they are never all exactly the same. They all take lead and inspiration from whatever Sabbath or occasion I am working with. So, for example, if I'm doing this activity around Samhain, my objective is to make a home cleansed and blessed and somewhere my ancestors would be proud to visit, but also to bring in extra protection, because it's not just ancestors who are walking about in spirit around the time of Samhain when that veil is thinnest. At Yule, it might be that I'm blessing the home and actively invoking light and warmth and more comfort for the family, especially in that time of the depths of winter, when it's easy to see the world as bleak and sad, as opposed to the magic it really is. For the equinox, I'm looking at focusing in on balance. I'm actively bringing energy and the spirit of the home back into balance and alignment for the darker half of the year. So if I'm blessing and cleansing the bedrooms, I'm actively focusing in on removing old energy, any nightmares that might have occurred through the previous season, or even some of the anxieties that we may have taken to bed with us when we were worried or anxious, and then sealing the room with a blessing of peaceful sleep and comfort. Because when we have a good night's sleep, we heal, we are ready for the next day, and of course are balanced. If I am cleansing and blessing a doorway, I'm actively invoking the spirit guardians of the home to bring protection. And I'm also setting up energetic nets to catch people's negative energy so that it's not brought into my home with them. Blessing and cleansing a home regularly, especially at the time of the Sabbats, and then incorporating that particular Sabbat's meanings, messages and correspondences help to infuse the home with love, magic and care. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast, and remember that just because the autumn equinox is almost upon us, it doesn't mean that it's too late to keep house. For me personally, there may only be one day of the equinox, but the entire month of September is all about seeking balance and preparing for winter. So don't ever feel that it's too late to celebrate this wonderful Sabbath. From the time, mists and distance between us, blessings from me to you.